Hello, everyone. Welcome to this part 2 of the MII's online church webinar series. It is my great privilege to welcome each and every one of you on behalf of the MII team. What a joy it is to have all of you this evening, and looking forward to learning with you, looking forward to hearing from our special speaker today, Kranda from Saddleback Church, and looking forward to all that God will do this evening. Thank you so much for being here. And first, before anything else, let's just bow our heads and look to God and ask Him to help us this evening. Shall we look to God in prayer? Heavenly Father, we come to you in Jesus' name. We thank you for this amazing opportunity that you've given us once again to come together as one body to learn from you. We ask you to come and be our teacher. We thank you for giving us this, the speaker that you've given us today. And we pray that your presence will cover him as he speaks to us. I pray that you will speak through him. And I pray that you will speak to each and every one of us as we listen about the strategies for small groups. I just pray that this will be something that will help us build a community with love and with efficiency, in a way that you would like to build your church, because that is how you built the first church, Father, a small group. So I just pray that these strategies will go deep into our hearts, open the eyes of our understanding, open our ears for new things we've never heard before, things we never thought before, that this will be a day of breakthrough for each and every one of us here, Father. We love you, Lord. Look forward to this evening with great joy and expectation. In Jesus' matchless name we pray. Amen. Thank you once again. And this is a unique webinar. I'm going to start by saying that. And some of you are thinking, come on, Nachi, everybody says that. You know, I told you, I said the same thing in the last webinar. If you're part of the part 1, you would have heard me. I said, this is a unique webinar, but I'm going to tell you this. I'm not saying this just like, you know, every webinar host would say that. This is indeed a unique webinar. I will explain why in a few minutes from now. But first, I want to run you through Media Impact International's vision. And some of you may know it. Most of you who have signed up, we've seen our people who are associated with us, but there may be few people here in our midst who are not aware of what MI does. So let me quickly run you through the vision and the mission to see more people in unreached areas brought into God's kingdom and growing their faith through the effective utilization of media. That is what Media Impact International is all about. Our heart is for media. Our heart is for building God's kingdom through anything related to media. And MII's mission is to identify, assess, and come alongside partner ministries to strategically increase their media impact. That is the mission of MII. And we've got lots of resources on our website. If you want to learn more about MII, please visit mii.global and you will find a lot of information there. So without much of any other information, I just want to take you straight into the session with just only one housekeeping here. I know all of you are Zoom experts. You've probably attended lots of Zoom webinars, so you don't need another instruction on how to use Zoom and things like that. I just want to tell you one thing. If you have questions, please ask them. Jay loves to answer questions. I know him. He enjoys that. So we will take lots of questions in the towards the end of the session. But I request that you ask your questions in the Q&A section, because in the chat, if there's a lot of chat messages, it will go up and down. So a Q&A is a great place to ask questions. And we will take those questions towards the end, and Jay will be answering them. Okay, I told you this is a unique webinar. Let me quickly justify why I said that, because this is not just about learning. This is also about implementing. This is what I love about everything that MII does, because it is very unique, and it is something that you've not heard before. I mean, if I could, I would ask all of you to put your hands up, whoever has attended a Zoom webinar, and then after 3 days, you have probably remember 20 to 30% of what you heard, right? Because that's fine. That's just normal. That's just, that's how things are, because life happens and we move on. Ministry happens. There's just so many things happening and we move on. But what we are going to do here is we are not just teaching you. Jay is not just going to be teaching you about this, but we are also going to handhold you in implementing this. Okay, so this is where this webinar is unique. Usually you attend a webinar, you go away, that's it. But here we are offering free 90-day support, okay, to help you implement. Where have you heard that? Here is an opportunity for you to take full advantage of that. You not only attend this free webinar, but you're also going to get help in implementing what you learn here for the next 90 days through the support system that we have for you. But I'm going to give you all those details at the end. So please stick around till the end of the webinar so that you can learn how to sign up for this free 90-day support. All right, now let's go to the man of the hour, Jay Kranda, who is a good friend, a wonderful, wonderful teacher, and a man with lots of experience. You are going to absolutely enjoy what he's got to share with you. He is someone who is doing these things. He's not just teaching here, but someone who's in the middle of everything in Saddleback Church, who is implementing all that you're going to learn. He's the online pastor at Saddleback Church, oversees an online community of tens of thousands of people around the world with online small groups, home groups, local gatherings, and the various types. He's going to probably talk more about that as he goes into the session. He's the co-author of free ebook, State of the Online Church. He's married to Jody, and they have 2 boys and a girl. And you can learn more about Jay in his website, jkranda.com. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together or click the hands button to welcome Jay Kranda. Over to you, Jay.
Thank you, Nachi. Thank you very much. It's very nice spending an evening with you. I'm coming all the way from California right now. So it's early my morning, late your evening, but I'm excited to be talking about online groups with you. And so this should be a very fun and practical conversation. The goal here is to help you launch groups at your church or your ministry. We want to kind of give you some reasons why online groups make sense for your church, even post-COVID situation where it's harder to meet. I believe online groups are very practical for all sorts of ways, especially for reaching people in creative ways. Also, we're going to lay out a very simple way to launch groups at your church or your ministry right away. And like Nachi said, something that's very unique to what MII is doing is this isn't just done when it's over. There is coaching and an expert that you can talk to. People like me, people like Nachi, people in the region solving problems that are specific to what's going on where you're at. Every country has different tools and platforms and options, but we want to help you be successful. We want you to launch online groups at your church because we believe it's a great way to get people into community. And so I'm very excited to be with you this evening. If you missed it, the first webinar that we did was all about streaming your service, getting your church service online, how to get it onto Facebook or YouTube. We spent an entire training just on that topic. And if you want to get access to that, I'm going to highly encourage you to watch that first webinar, the playback. And if you, at the end, part of the coaching, there's actually an FAQ page, you can get access to that. So make sure that if you missed that, rewatch to go back and get access to that so that you can more understand kind of the foundation that we're building upon. But what's the whole goal of this idea of what we're trying to help you do is we're helping you do church. And I understand that your church got hit with a very unique situation, and we're all dealing with this, where all of a sudden, many of our churches could not meet because of COVID-19. All of a sudden, we all had to be digital, and we were thrown into this situation that we're all figuring out together. And what I want to help you do is help you figure out how to do your church online in a healthy way. And I understand that your church and my church might be different. We might have different methodologies. We might have different theology. We might have different programs. That is okay. Essentially, what we want you to do is we want you to do what church means to you online, right? And the first webinar, we talked about streaming your service and getting your worship service online and doing that right. But we know that church is much more than just showing up into a building once a week. You and I are the church. Community is the church. How do we do fellowship? And so what we talked about first was large gatherings. Part of doing church is having a large corporate gathering. just like the early church did. And we see this in the book of Acts, in Acts 5, where they were meeting in temple courts and they were gathering in large formats. That's streaming your service. That's the first webinar. But we know church is much more than that. It's not just getting together. It's also about having fellowship. It's doing life with each other. In the book of Acts, they primarily did this early on by meeting in houses. In Acts 5, they talk about they met in houses. Priscilla and Aquila, when Paul's talking to them, they met in houses. Titus met in a house. And so we know that the early church was not defined by a building. It was defined actually by where people were at. And so how do you get people in the crowd to get into smaller groups where they can be? And so this whole webinar is going to focus in on that topic, is how do you make a group actually a group using platforms like Zoom or Skype or Facebook Messenger Room or a tool from Google? What does it look like to have a Bible study or a life group or a cell group or a small group online? And that's what we're going to talk about in this webinar, and then help you over the next 90 days with our coaching. But also we know that it's not just about having large gatherings, small gatherings. You also need to encourage people to be mentoring people. This is where the way I talk about here is one-on-one meetings, is that there are people in your church mentoring people pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, you want that to happen. And that happens through training your mentors. You know, think about a Paul mentoring a Timothy, or a Paul mentoring a Titus, that type of mentorship. That happens through one-on-one connections. What I've found is when you do online groups right, your mentors start to understand how to do it digitally. Where, oh, I could just call this person, I can FaceTime this person, I could video call this person using this tool, and we can still meet digitally. Yes, you can mentor people from anywhere in the world using these tools. You have to understand how to do it, but once they get trained, your church gets unleashed to actually continue to do the ministry. And then lastly, it's self-guided. These are on-demand type of experiences. It might be a Bible reading plan that they're doing on their own. It might be a video course that maybe you've done. But the idea is that if you're doing large gatherings, small gatherings, one-on-one connections, and self-guided experiences, this actually starts to look like a full, robust, biblical understanding of what church is. And yes, you can do these online. And so watch the first webinar to learn how to do the large gatherings right. And then in this webinar, we're gonna focus in on the small groups, which I believe will influence the others. And so let's dive into online groups. And I just wanted to real quick, just again, encourage you, is that we're gonna spend the last 30 minutes or so just answering your questions. And so I'm gonna talk about online groups here over the next 30 minutes, but please drop your question, no matter how complex or silly you think it is. We want to answer your question here on the webinar. So drop your questions into the chat or use the Q&A, and then Nachi and I will be answering those at the end. So we won't be stopping while we're going, but I want you to ask your questions, and we're going to spend some time diving into those. I've actually been doing online groups since 2010, which is 10 years now, which is, I can't believe that actually. It was one of the first things I started to do when I came on staff at my church. And back then it was very different. We were using a tool called TalkBox. You know, companies like Zoom, I don't even think they didn't even exist. Especially it wasn't a public tool, but it looked very different. We actually had to build a lot of the tools on how to meet, because there wasn't amazing tools like Zoom and Facebook Messenger Rooms and Google Hangouts or Google Meetups. We had to do it ourselves, and it cost us money to actually build it out. And now we have amazing free tools. And back then I had to teach people how to do it. What I'm finding out is, because of the COVID-19 situation, is more and more people are understanding how to video meetup. They know how to jump on a video call and talk. Still, some people don't understand it, but I had this the first couple weeks of COVID-19, where my grandma, who at the time was pretty sick, we couldn't see her because she was in a high risk category. And so I had to teach her how to use Zoom. And it was really funny, but she understood it. It wasn't easy, but she got it. And we're having a digital maturing of the internet right now, where everybody's figuring it out. And so 2010, not many people even knew you could actually use platforms like Skype and so forth. But now many of us are, but we've come a far way since 2010. And I'm going to share a lot of those learnings where I've launched thousands of online groups and reached many thousands of people through those groups over the last 10 years. And I want to make your process of launching online groups at your church very simple from both our successes and our failures. I don't want you to repeat the things we've done. I want you to start from a higher place. This is so mature now, online groups, is that there's hacks. I don't know if you know this, but there are things called extensions in Chrome. They're plugins essentially where you can have different hacks. And this is actually a really funny hack. And this just shows how advanced we are. We're not just meeting with people, but we can actually do fun things online and silly things. And this is a hack where what you could do is you can launch a video call in a browser with, I think it's Google, and you can actually change out one of the video screens to bring in Netflix. And this is really funny. You can actually get on a video call and you and your friends can watch a show on Netflix together. And people actually created this so that they did it for work. So the idea is that you could be at work and it could look like you're actually working, but you're actually all watching something on Netflix together. But this is how advanced we are with video calling now, is that people have built tools like this that are obviously not productive, but it just shows that people get this. People are understanding this. And this is where you and I, as ministers, as pastors, as people want to move people into community, we use these tools. I mean, really, we are called to be good stewards of what God has given us. And the key here is that how are we going to be a good steward of this tool? Online groups are, what I have found is that there are a lot of people out there doing community. There are a lot of people like Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApps. All these are doing community. Now, I want you to know, as we look at Scripture, ultimately, that community is not defined by how much you message somebody. It's defined by your connection with God, how you're communing with God, and also your connection with other believers. I mean, the church, Christianity has proprietary ownership of what community is. That word proprietary is a big word in technology. If you work at a company like Facebook, you actually, proprietary means like, I own this code. I own this app. And if you do something that messes with that, or you try to sell it, I can sue you in court. I say that we as Christians have proprietary ownership of what biblical community is, meaning that whatever community is happening on these spaces, ultimately it is a shadow of what real community is with our God. And so you, the church, as you show up digitally, I think you have something more to offer through offering online groups, through offering ways for people to engage with you and jump on a video call and do a Bible study, a life group or a small group. And so we have to do this right, though. We have to do it biblically, and we have to do it correctly with the current tools. And so before we kind of jump into the details of what an online group looks like and how you launch it, I want to lay a little bit of a groundwork of why online groups are important. A couple different reasons why online groups are important is, first, they provide a way for people to experience your church before setting foot on site or meeting you in person. This is the idea that has become very popular in kind of the consumer space, people selling things on platforms like Amazon and Alibaba and so forth, is that where people want to see what they're buying and they want to try it. They may want to see a 360 view. They may want to read the reviews. They may even want to get it at their house and maybe they want to return it. They don't want to talk to an expert. They call this the self-service economy. I don't need to talk to somebody who knows it all. I just want to figure it out myself. It's an empowerment. And the same thing's true with your church. People not only want to watch your church service, but they want to experience what your church is. And the way you can do this is by launching a group online. People can actually jump into something where they can be heard. See, a stream on Facebook or YouTube, you are pushing out to people. A group is where people can engage themselves and they can be heard. They can actually ask questions. They can open up. And by offering online groups, you offer an on-ramp where people can actually start to talk and experience your church before ever setting foot on site at your physical church, in your building, or wherever, or your home, or wherever you're meeting. And so people want to experience this, and this is going to become more and more popular. There's a popular app here in the United States that has popped up, and it has to do with investing, buying stock in the stock market. It's called Robinhood. It's very popular. But the idea of this app is that they make it very easy to buy stock on the market, in the stock market, which is very complex. I don't get it all. But what they did was, it used to be people would want to talk to an expert. They would want to talk to a trader. But now you can just download an app, link your bank account, and you can do it. And the whole concept is, people don't want to talk to an expert. They just want to try it on themselves and see if they like it. Groups is a great way to reach more people and let them try on your church before setting foot on site. It's also a safe way to engage people in community. And what I mean by that is that people showing up in person at your church, in your home, meeting you for coffee, that is a big step. And there's all sorts of reasons why they may not be ready. It may be they're in a season of life where maybe they're insecure and they're not ready to meet you. Maybe they're sickness issues. They have a physical sickness where they can't show up in person right now. They may be working in a way that they can't get near you, or they're traveling a lot. There might be security issues, like they may be in a relationship where maybe somebody is of another faith, and them showing up in person is not possible. They may be watching in a country or in an area where they literally can't tell other people about their interest in Christianity. And providing an online group option is a way to engage those people before they ever set foot on site. And you get to teach them about Christianity. You get to witness to them and actually get them into community, much more than just actually watching something online. It's something that's very important to understand. Not everybody experiences God like the Ethiopian eunuch or the jail the jailer in the book of Acts, where there's this immediate conversion. Some people have a conversion slowly. I think about the disciples. Jesus spent 3 years with them, and even at the cross they scattered. So it took 3 years for them to understand this. Some people, it's going to take years for them to understand the importance of showing up in person. And so this is a great way. Online groups are a great way to experience that. And then lastly, it's a great way to actually launch in-person groups, face-to-face groups. And what I mean by that is, what you'll find out, and this is what I found out over the last 10 years, is people start online groups, or they join an online group, and ultimately what happens is they learn what an online group is about, and they learn what small groups or Bible study or a life group is about, and then they go, hey, I want to do this in person. And so it's actually a great launch pad to launch more face-to-face small groups in homes. And so that comes with an intentional strategy of following up with people and asking them questions and actually helping them launch groups. But we've launched thousands of face-to-face groups out of our online group effort. So that's really important. So those are some key areas of why online groups are important. But I want you to understand they are valuable, not just because of COVID-19. They are valuable long-term. All sorts of reasons why online groups make sense for your church. And this is why it's something you should invest in. And this is why we're talking about this right now. So let's now talk a little bit about the strategy of online groups. What does it look like to actually do this? What are some tips and tricks to actually have this effectively going in your church? So first, don't focus on how they meet, but you just want them to meet. And what I mean by that is that don't think about the technology too much. What I have found by overseeing thousands of online groups is that people want to meet with their friends or their family, and they have their own tools and technology that they meet. Technology is relative to where you're watching from and the age you are. Now, if you have kids, you might realize that maybe your kids use different platforms than you do. And then maybe your parents use different platforms than you do. And then maybe you use different platforms than both of them. And that's because the platform isn't as important than the goal of what you're actually trying to do. So for example, me and my friends, when we meet, we use iMessenger. We use iMessenger. But for example, like my grandparents, they use the phone. I use predominantly Twitter and Instagram. My grandparents use Facebook. My kids predominantly use YouTube. And so that's because people use different tools. Don't worry about how they meet. Just try to get them to meet. And so what we tend to do at my church is that we tend to recommend one or two platforms. And we say, hey, if you want to do an online group, Zoom is a great tool. Facebook Messenger Rooms is a great tool. Google has a couple great tools. But I don't really worry about that. I kind of recommend some tools, but if they want to use a different tool, then I go, great, use that tool. I don't worry about I don't try to control how they meet. I just want them to meet, and then I recommend some great tools. And we're going to recommend a few tools and actually show you why some tools like Zoom are very powerful. But don't worry about how they meet. Just get them to meet, and then recommend a few tools. And what I found, especially because of COVID, people are getting smarter in this area. And a lot of times what happens is that I'll get an email or a message from somebody that, hey, I noticed you guys use Zoom and Facebook and Google. By the way, my business, we use this tool. Can I use this tool? And I go, yes, go. Again, I don't worry about how they're meeting. I just want them to meet and let them determine that. The other thing is online groups tend to have two ways that they connect. And this is really important. First, they have a home base. Home base is where they meet 24/7. It's the text message thread. It's the wall within the group. Predominantly, that might be, here in the United States, that might be, iMessenger or a text message thread. For other groups, it's Facebook. They might have a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group. Again, home base is where you can interact. It's the ability to kind of interact text-based, where you can kind of keep going. What's important about home base is that it has to be a tool that you can easily remove people and add people to if people join the group. One of the drawbacks of using cellular, like text messaging, is that you have to start a new thread, where if you're using a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group, you can just remove and add people. But this is where people meet when they're not meeting over a video call. And so this is where in that home base, you might go, hey guys, by the way, we're going to meet on Tuesday at 7 p.m. And then you might post questions during the week where people can update on prayer requests. Every online group has a home base. And then every online group also has a meeting space, and they don't need to be on the same tool. So for example, with my group, we use iMessenger. And then if we meet right now during COVID, we use Zoom. And so in the home base, I'll say, hey guys, we're meeting right now. And I'll put a link to our Zoom meeting room into our home base conversation. And then we join the Zoom meeting room over there. And so again, if you guys like Google, if you like Skype, if you like some other tool, that's okay. And so I encourage our online groups to have a home base and then also have a meeting space platform. And so those can be different. They also could be the same, depending on who you're reaching. But it's important to help your groups figure this out. They need both to be successful, a home base and a meeting space. Again, the most popular, just so you know, that I've experienced are text message type of experience groups for home base, a WhatsApp group, and a Facebook group. And then for Zoom, for the meeting space, it's primarily Zoom or Skype or a Google platform. Those are the most popular. But again, there are all sorts of tools, and we'll get into that. There's a tool here in the US that got really popular called House Party. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a video chat type of experience on the phone. It's very popular with people under 20. I've used it. I do not use it regularly, but there's platforms like Slack, Microsoft Teams has gotten really popular over the last couple of years. Again, there are many ways for people to meet. And that's why that first point is really important. Don't get wrapped up on how they meet. Just encourage your people to meet in online groups. And then just recommend a couple key tools, but you need a home base and a meeting space. And then the other big shift with online groups strategy-wise is that it's how people actually go through the teaching. And again, this question is going to be answered based off of your church's context and how you do this. And we're gonna talk about this in actually the launch part. But the big shift with online groups is that if you're doing a Bible study or a small group or a cell group or a life group in your home, let's say you're leading that at your church, you might actually get everybody in a room together and you welcome everybody. People will kind of introduce themselves, and then you might teach for 15-20 minutes. Well, in an online group, we've seen some shift in actually change in this area, where what we find is what people will do is that some will actually do teaching over the video call, or watch a video over the video call, or look over the video call. And then other people will actually watch it prior to the meeting. And so what I mean by that is, like, let's say you're in a WhatsApp group and you're doing an online group. So you're in your home base and you have 10 people that are a part of your online group. And the teacher will record a video and actually say, hey guys, this week we're going to talk about the book of James, chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. Hey, I posted a 5 to 10 minute video in the home base conversation. Hey guys, can you watch that prior to when we meet? And so what will happen is people will actually watch that on demand prior to meeting. And then when they get on the online group time on Zoom or Skype or Google, they'll actually only talk about the discussion questions. They'll only use it as a time to discuss, and they won't just sit and listen, because sitting and listening to somebody on a Zoom call talk for 10 to 20 minutes is difficult. It is possible, but I have found 95% of my online groups, 95% of them watch the video teaching prior to meeting. Only 10% will teach or read together. It's a little bit easier if you're going through a book of a Bible and you just read a passage together. That's easier to do. But if you're gonna teach, that's gonna be harder. And what I found is, let's do real time. Most of them actually watch the teaching prior. And so again, this is determined on how your church does the curriculum part of your teaching with online groups. For example, at my church, we do video teaching. My pastor or somebody on our teaching team will record a teaching. And so it's really easy. I just post a link in our Facebook group or in our iMessage conversation in Homebase, and I say, hey, everybody, watch this part of me. And then at Tuesday at 7, we just talk. And so that's a big shift. Most actually watch the teaching prior to meeting, and then some do it. Again, 95% watch it prior. Again, you can do whatever you want, but it is harder to watch somebody teach for 15-20 minutes on an online group. But I've seen both work very well, but I just want to let you know that's another strategy. Most watch on demand, very few watch real time. And so that's something to think through. And then lastly, on the strategy, we have an intentional strategy to move all of our groups from audio, meaning maybe they're starting with just a phone call, or maybe they're not turning on their video, which is a big thing. Not everybody's ready to share their face. And we have a strategy where we actually move all of our audio-based online groups to video-based. And then we have a strategy of moving our video-based groups to in-homes. And so this might be a 2-year journey, but I think through this pastorally, as I'm over these groups, is, okay, great. This group is meeting and they're just using, maybe they're jumping on a Zoom call and they've turned off their video. Again, people might turn off their video because of security concerns. If somebody's in a situation where they don't feel comfortable sharing their face, turning on their video is not something they might want to do immediately, and that's okay. I found people grieving. Somebody who's gone through a loss might not be ready to share their face. And so we allow people to start audio only, and a lot of tools allow that. But I ultimately, as a pastor, I want to shepherd them towards a healthier expression. And so I might let them do that for a season. But then I'll up with them. I go, hey, you've been doing this audio-based group. Have you thought about moving to video? Because ultimately, by having your video on, it's more intimate. I can see you more, and I have more chance to get to know you. There's a difference between a video call and a phone call. The video call, I can see if you're paying attention. You can tell if I'm looking you in the eye. If I'm on a phone call, I can have headphones in, and I could be doing stuff, and you know that I'm distracted. And so video calls make you pay attention more, which leads to better conversation. And so we think about the strategy. How do we move our audio-based online groups to video, and how do we move our video to face-to-face? And this looks very practically by just saying, hey, you've been you've been meeting on this video call for the last year. Hey, why don't you guys start a group in your home? What if you take everything you've learned in your online group and actually do something in your home? One of the things that I found with our online groups is a lot of groups will continue on with their online or video online group. And then what they do is they start a secondary group in their home, where maybe it's with family, maybe it's with friends. But this is a strategy. What you're doing is you're teaching them what small groups are about, or what a Bible study is about for your church. And then ultimately you shepherd them towards something face-to-face. And so don't worry about how people meet. Recommend just a few platforms. Online groups have a home base and a meeting space, and those can be different. Most of the groups are probably going to watch the video part of the teaching part prior to meeting, but some watch it together. And then have a strategy of moving your audio to video and your video to face-to-face. And that's going to probably take 1.5 to 2 year journey, and just understand that trajectory. And then lastly, which we're going to spend a whole section on this, about how to actually teach people what online groups are, because that's a big question. That happens by you modeling it. You actually model how online groups work. And you do that by launching an online group and have them experiencing them. You actually teach them what it's about. It's like trying to teach somebody what the internet is. Imagine trying to explain the internet I was going to say your kids, but your kids probably understand the internet better than you. But teaching somebody what the internet is that's never experienced it, the best way to experience it is just by doing it. It's like learning a new language. You can read about a new language, but the best way to learn it is to be dropped into a country and just experience it. The same thing's true with online groups. And so we have a whole strategy that we're going to talk about where you lead an online group and you invite your leaders into it and you actually model it. You let them try it on. The idea of this is when we look at Jesus is God incarnate. It's that's who the Father, I understand who God is by seeing Jesus. And so the same way we want to provide a flesh experience, a try it on experience where we can actually see it. And this is where you launch an online group yourself and you do it with your key leaders. And so that's a great way to kind of teach people, is by modeling it and letting them try it on. So that's a thing that we're going to talk about at the end. A great tool to do this, to actually model online groups and actually have people try it on, is with Zoom. Now, I am not saying that Zoom is the best platform for you to use. You need to determine that platform in your context. And Zoom has a lot of pros and it has some cons. Many of you have probably heard about this over the last couple months, that they've had some security issues and they're starting to get some of this in line. I want to let you know that I predominantly use Zoom, and I have for the last 5 years. I've been a paying subscriber of Zoom. So I really enjoy Zoom, but there are a lot of great platforms. One of my favorite features of Zoom they're probably the best at this, is that called Zoom breakout rooms. I don't know how many people have heard this about this tool, but what you can do is you can actually get a bunch of people on a Zoom call. You can get up to 1,000 people, and you can break them out into individual rooms. And so what we do, we have something called, we call them centralized groups. The idea is that these are large online groups where we have up to, I think we limit it to about 150 people, where we can have 150 people in an online group. And what we do is we get them together, and I'll say, hey, I'll start, and I'll say, hey guys, thanks for joining this online group. We're going to be talking about, James 1 this week. I would have already posted a link in our Facebook group, which we primarily use Facebook group for these. Hey guys, remember, you should have watched this. We're going to talk about this. And what I do is I say, we're going to break out into our rooms. And Zoom allows you to take, 150 people, and you can break them into individual rooms on the call. You can actually do this with Zoom breakout rooms. And so what it looks like is that you have to enable it. So before you start the call, it's something you actually have to go to your account. You have to go to zoom.us and log into your account. You have to go to account settings and enable it. I have a whole video where I actually have a tutorial. I did this with about 500 people in a Zoom call, and I broke them out into 50 rooms. Actually, I can show you what this looks like. Again, Nachi will explain this, but in the follow-up, we'll put a link to that video that you can watch. But what you do is that as the host of the group, what you do is you actually hit the breakout room function that you enable, and then you can start up to 50 rooms, and then it will automatically assign people. So for example, if you had 1,000 people and you had 10 rooms, you're going to break people into, I think that's 100 people per room. And so there's some of those things. And so you can start with, let's say, 50 people, and you can have 8 breakout rooms, and then people will be in groups of 5 to 8. And so what you would say is at the front end, you go, hey guys, we're going to talk about James 1. We're going to break into our breakout rooms. And then what we're going to do is that in your room of 5 to 8 people, talk about question 1. And you can treat it like you're subgrouping in your house. It's an amazing feature to take a bunch of people and break them out. And you can scale this in a big way. And so you can do this. And then what you can do is you can actually, you the host, you can actually jump into each room. You can pop in and check in with each room. And then you can message all the rooms at the same time. And you can say, hey, and it will actually show up at the top as a text. You go, hey, by the way, you should be on question 2 now. And then you can close it at the end. So at the end, you start all together with all, let's say 50 people. You break out into rooms of 5 to 8 for 30 minutes where they talk and discuss, and you, the host, can jump into the room and check it out. And then you close and you bring everybody back together. But this is a great feature that you can use to kind of model what online groups are about. And we do this. We leave these groups, and then what we do is we do this for a couple weeks, and then at the end of it, we go, guys, you guys have been doing online groups the last couple weeks with us. We've been doing it with Zoom, but I want you now to continue on. And that's a way that we launch online groups. But Zoom breakout rooms is a powerful tool, and we'll post in the coaching. We'll give you a link. So if you sign up at the end, we'll give you a link for that video training, so you can see this in action. I actually have a whole training video on this. And so Zoom breakout rooms are really powerful. Actually, when they join the room, you actually see this. You see joining a breakout room. And this is the option, you as the host, you can see everybody in each room and the ability to kind of join it. So it's a very powerful way to kind of host online groups and actually have a large online group that breaks out into small. A couple other platforms that I would recommend. Again, these are just a few of the platforms that are really great. You might have a better platform, or if there's something regionally that makes sense, or if you have one of your members of your church that want to use something else, I wouldn't get in the way of it. These are a few platforms I would be really interested in the chat right now. If you would actually in the chat post your preferred meeting platform, video meeting platform, and a platform that you've heard about that maybe is not on this list. So maybe post that in the chat right now. I would like to learn with you. And I know Nachi would too. So maybe post your favorite platform, and then maybe what's a platform on here that you're not seeing. And so these are just a few of the tools. Again, some of them are better for group conversation. Some of them are better for one-on-one connection. For example, FaceTime has gotten a lot better at this. But FaceTime groups aren't as good as other tools. They're still primarily just a one-on-one. But these are a few of the platforms. A couple things I just wanted to mention briefly about what to consider when picking a platform. Consider pricing. Is it free? Does it, sometimes some platforms like Zoom cost money. Zoom, one of the drawbacks is that it's free up to, I believe, 40 minutes, and then you have to pay. So just understand that. Sometimes they limit the size of groups as well, depending if you're a paid user or not. Is it hard or easy to join? This is a big thing. Zoom, for example, one of the things about Zoom that they've gotten in trouble for, they are so easy to join a group. So it's really frictionless, meaning that there's no issue with joining. I don't have to be in your contacts like a WhatsApp group or a Skype. I could just join your group. So it's really easy for new people, but it's also easy for people to scam and hack it. And so part of that is it easy or hard to join. And so understand that. Is it a single click? Is extra? More security features you have, the harder it is for people to join. Understand that. That's just something you have to think about. Is there a mobile app or a desktop app? Can people use it by just calling in? Can people, do they have to have a mobile app? Understand these different tools. People have different technology setups. Just understand that. A size of group limit. Sometimes they limit it to 10 people or 100 people. Depending on your context, that might be an issue. Zoom can scale up to, I think, 1,000 people. Again, most of us don't have to deal with that. I've never led a Zoom with that many people. I think I've only had up to 600 people, but understand there's group size limits. Share your screen feature. Different platforms might not have this. where you can actually share your screen. Right now, I'm sharing my screen on Zoom. You can see my keynote presentation. And so if you wanted to share a video on your online group, not every tool can do that. FaceTime has some limits on this, but most tools are getting pretty savvy, but understand, Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Skype are going to have advanced features because they've been doing this a long time. But understand that security features on when picking a platform is really important. Understand what can you put in place to protect the people. We did a Zoom call the first couple of weeks with one of our teams, and actually we got hacked. Somebody joined the call and was taking control of it. And we learned that we needed to enable some things. And so Zoom and other platforms have enabled a lot of different things. One of the popular ones on Zoom is waiting rooms, where you can actually make it where you can put people who join the room into a waiting room, and you have to confirm them to join the room. And so that way you can kind of screen people. There's encryption. Some tools have more encryption than others. For example, Zoom does encryption. I will say it's not fully end-to-end encryption, so I would study up on what that means for the platform. And then passwords. And then, for example, you would change out the password every week. You could have the same URL, but you change out the password. These are all things you can do if security is a concern. What's important is that if you're leading the group, the more, I would say, security features you put in place, the more you're going to need a co-host with you moderating the chat and those features. So if I'm teaching, it's going to be hard for me to teach or lead the group and also confirm people into the room. And so these are all things you have to think through. And then adoption of the platform in your area. This is really important. You want an online group to be seamless. If you're using a newer platform or a hard to use platform, the more somebody is familiar with that platform, the easier it is for them to open up. And I think about this a lot. Ultimately, we do online groups not for them to be safe, not for them to be really techie. We do them so people open up. So what's the best tool to do that? And sometimes it's the most widely used tool. And then you figure out how to do that in the safest way. So just be aware of that. These are some of the tools out of this list that I would recommend to kind of start with and experiment. And I want to encourage you, experiment with these tools, use different tools, and use what you feel comfortable with. So try a bunch of these. Again, I want to hear in the chat, what tools do you recommend and what are some new tools maybe you're hearing about? These are just the few that are popular here in the US. Again, there are hundreds of these now. I'm always hearing about a new meeting tool. And so here, I want to spend a little bit of time now just looking through what does a typical online group look like. I think I want to get super practical. And so itinerary, what I mean by from start to end, most online groups are about an hour or just about an hour, and they meet video based. Against most of my groups meet video based. I would say about 15% only meet audio, because again, we're always moving our audio based into video type of experiences. And most of our groups focus in on discussion. And so most of our online groups, they start with a welcome. They say, hey, everybody, thanks for joining this online group. We're talking about this today. And one of the things that I wanted to tell you is that with online groups, people are late, just like they're late to church, just like they're late to your normal Bible study. So people are late to video calls as well, okay? So give some time in the welcome to kind of let people get on. But you welcome everybody, you make them feel comfortable, and you call out people. You say, hey, Nachi, I see that you're on, or Jessica, I see that you're on, and you start to make them feel like they're at home. Again, they're meeting digitally, but it doesn't mean you can't be warm and friendly. So make them feel friendly. Sometimes what I do is I say, oh, hey, I notice your books in the background, or I noticed that you have that behind you. And I want them to know that I see them, but I also see where they're at. And you welcome them, you make them feel comfortable. And then we have a warm-up question. And what we mean by this is that I'm trying to get everybody in the online group to talk. What's important with groups, which is very different from a worship service, is that with groups, you want discussion, you want engagement. We talk about this with the idea is that this isn't the expert talking out. We almost see it like a star, where we want everybody talking to each other. Well, in an online group, the way you do that is that you have to get people comfortable unmuting and talking. And you have to get them just in that zone where they're okay with sharing things. And so you do that by having an icebreaker question. You have a question that you've thought about ahead of time, like, hey, what's one thing you watched this week or that you really loved? Or you might do a game. There's actually a feature on Zoom that you can actually have a whiteboard, and you can actually, people can draw. It's a really cool feature that is very powerful, and we'll play Pictionary. I don't know if you've ever heard this game where you have a word, you send a word to somebody like horse, and then they can draw, they start to draw, and people guess it in the chat. And so have a question or a game in the front to get people warmed up to talk. And most of this time, you're getting everybody comfortable with unmuting and kind of just discussing. And then optionally, you would spend time watching the study or read the book. Again, if your group already watched it by posting the link in your home-based conversation, you would skip this section. But like I told you, 90% of our groups actually, they've watched things prior. So we actually skip right to the next, where we actually jump right into discussion. And so, and again, this is going to look different for your church and your context. My church, what we do is we normally have some questions based off of what we read or what we watched that week. And so what happens is the host will just ask those questions. And so there might be, 3 to 5 questions, and they'll spend, 30 minutes just discussing. And so, hey guys, so we read or we watched, James 1 talks about, having faith like this. Do you understand what he's talking about this? Or when's the time in your life that you had faith like that? And then everybody talks about it. And we focus in on just having discussion over the Zoom call. Again, by doing the welcome right, you've started to make people feel comfortable. The warm up, you had an icebreaker question so people know how to unmute and mute themselves. And now people are ready. They are ready to discuss and share what they've learned. And so again, in the home-based conversation, you've posted enough questions where people feel like they're engaged and they're ready. And now you can jump right into discussion. And then all the same thing's true about leading a Bible study or a small group, where if somebody's not talking, you just, hey, I noticed, Nachi, you haven't said anything yet. Hey, what do you think about this question? Question 2. When Paul says this here, what do you think he's saying there? And you have a conversation. And so our online groups are in on discussion. And if you've done all the previous things right, you have a healthy conversation. People feel comfortable. And then we end with prayer requests. And something we do is we spend about 10 to 15 minutes just talking through prayer requests, and people share and open up and have share what's going on in their life, and they get super personal. I try to have different people lead different parts of the group. So maybe I have another person lead the icebreaker warm-up section. I lead the discussion questions. And then I have another person lead the prayer request. By sharing ownership of the group, people feel vested. They're invested in the group. And so they'll show up more frequently and they'll share more actively. So I would encourage you, as you launch online groups, have people share ownership of the group. And then lastly, they end with prayer. And then what they'll do is that whoever did the prayer request, will type that up and post those prayer requests in the actual home-based conversation. And so now you have this active home-based thread in a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group. And now you have an active video call meeting space happening on Zoom or Skype or Google of some sort. But that's what a basic online group looks like, breakdown. It's usually an hour long. It's very straightforward and super focused on conversation. And if you're picking a good platform for meeting that people feel comfortable with, technology won't get in the way because people are comfortable with that. And then I want to just spend the last few minutes talking about a simple way to launch online groups and to get very practical. And I want to let you know, we're coming here to the end. We're going to answer some questions. So make sure you're posting your questions in the Q&A, the chat section. And Nachi and I are going to go through those questions. So make sure you post those questions. I know we've been going quick and we have coaching, but make sure you're asking those questions. We're going to be talking about that for the remaining of the time. So simple way to launch online groups. You got to provide a model where people can experience your groups. So you're right now wanting to maybe launch groups at your church. You're like, okay, Jay, I want to do this tomorrow. Actually, I want to do this tonight. I want to do this tonight and launch online groups. Well, how do you go from not having any online groups to having 5 online groups? Well, you have to teach people what an online group is. This is the popular saying that you don't just give somebody water, but you teach them how to get watered themselves. With my kids, I do this. I could keep refilling their water, or I can actually just bring them to the faucet and teach them how to do it. And I've now scaled this. I made it easier on myself, and I've taught them to do something. How do you teach people how to do online groups and what this means? Well, the best way to do this is to launch it yourself. So you as the pastor to say, so this week, I would encourage you to launch an online group yourself and invite up to 10 of your key leaders of your church to be part of it. Go, okay, guys, we are going to do an online group. I just was part of this webinar MII hosted, and there's some questions. There's a coaching that I can ask any question. I want us actually to do it. So what you would do is that you would do an online group yourself with 10 key leaders at your church, and you would meet for 3 weeks. And you could do Zoom, you can use Skype, you can use whatever platform you like, but you lead it yourself. And you go, guys, we're going to meet for 3 weeks, and I want us to experience how online groups work. So meet 3 weeks in a row with your key leaders, and out of that, you actually do it. You do the welcome. You actually have a normal group. You pick, maybe you can read through a small book of the Bible, like 1st or 2nd John, and you actually do an online group. You go through it. You start a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group out of it. You do a home base and a meeting space, and you go through it, and you do it for 3 weeks. You detail out learnings of that, what worked, what didn't. You capture screenshots of you guys doing it. And then out of that, you launch online groups out of that. So what you've done is now you've taught your 10 key leaders what online groups are, and you encourage them to start their own online groups, and you use screen captures and you tell stories of how God used that online group. The best way to teach your church how to do something is that you have to model it. You have to do it yourself. And I need you to move from just, cognitively, like conceptually, oh, this is what online, for you actually doing it. And so do an online group here over the next 3 weeks, launch one yourself with some of your key leaders and do it. And then out of that, you'll understand what it means and you'll get to tell people what it is. And you'll have 10 people at your church that also will know what it is. So that's the best way I found launching. This is what we did in 2010. We did it ourselves. We launched an online group ourselves. And now we do large online groups now all the time where we invite people in to experience it. This is the simplest way I've learned to launch online groups. You just got to do it yourself. There was actually a couple years ago, we had an online group that was meeting in Hong Kong. This is actually 2013. They were meeting in Hong Kong. And this is like a really cool story where they were meeting, they were going to university, and they actually were meeting regularly in their home. And they were just a group of young people, and they were connecting. And what they decided to do was they decided to actually move from online to face-to-face. And then years later, we actually launched a church through that online group in their area. And now they go to a physical church in person. So it talks about the power of going from digital to face-to-face to now having a church. I know many churches around the world that have launched churches out of online group efforts, which is really powerful. So what you're doing with online groups, it's not just digital, it's not just virtual, it actually can be face-to-face. It's a very powerful experience. Lastly, I just wanted to talk about security really briefly. Maybe Nanchi, as you come on, we'll talk about this a little bit more if people have questions. But with security, think through some security issues in your context. I understand every region, every country has different security issues, and there are ways to make your online group secure. A couple ways: you can screen people with questions. So before people join an online group, you ask them questions. You don't just let them join, but you make sure that you know who they are and you know what they believe. So you can ask them questions like, how did you find out about this? Do you believe in God? And based off how they respond, you can choose to let them join the group. Again, we don't do a lot of secure. I would say 99% of our groups are very open groups. We have 1% of our groups that meet in places in the world that we have some security issues, and we do screen it. You can also, if security is an issue, you can have a video where they have to watch this video before joining the group. So you can kind of screen them even further. The idea is that if they really want to join the group, they'll watch this video. You can keep links private. Don't post links to Zoom on social media or in an email. Only send links one-on-one privately, and then change out the link every week. Big way that people get hacked is they post the link in a public email or they post it on social media, but just send things privately to people and then change out the link frequently. And then pick the most secure video platform that you can think of. And again, that's going to be determined on in your circumstance. The last thing is don't make video required. And I mentioned this briefly, that video is a very powerful way. Video is intimate, and some people aren't ready to show their face, and maybe not showing their face or allowing them to use a false name might be okay depending on your setting. You might want to think about a ministry where people can safely kind of just be heard. And so these are some things to kind of think about to having a secure meeting if security is an issue. So next steps, launch an online group at your church this week. Pick up to 10 people at your church, key leaders that are essential to your church, and do an online group yourself with those people. Do an online group yourself and do it for 3 weeks, and you learn what an online group is and how helpful it is, and teach your people. And if you do that right, 10 people 3 weeks. And then the other thing is join. MII actually has a Facebook group. We have a home-based conversation that you can join. This is the link. You can also get access to this link in the coaching. We'll give you access to this. And then lastly, engage in the 90-day follow-up. This is really important. We don't want you just to end here. We want to go on this journey with you on launching online groups. So as you launch your online group with your members of your church, and you run into an issue, people like me and Nachi and coaches in the region, we want to answer questions. You might go, hey, I know you guys talked about this, but this didn't make sense when we met, or our audio isn't working, or how do you do this? We want to answer those questions. And so we have coaching to help you on this journey. And so I'm very excited for you to launch online groups at your church. And I know it's a powerful way to reach people in very new ways and engage them in the church, and ultimately have them come to know Jesus and get discipled and know what it means to follow Jesus at your local church in person. And it's a great way to kind of reach people that way and get them into your church. And so I want to encourage you to launch an online group this week with core leaders, get into the Facebook group and engage in the coaching. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Nachi to kind of do some closing deal. And then we're going to spend a bunch of time just answering your questions.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. What a package full of information. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think first we'll go with questions, because we have quite a few questions, and then we will also then I think in the middle of it we will get back to some closing thoughts, and then we'll take some more questions toward the end, if that's okay with you.
Perfect. I love that people are eager to ask some questions. So let's get going.
There's been a lot of questions. So I like to talk about 2 questions before we go to some closing thoughts. One is about regulations and moderation. So typically in small groups, you've got various types of people. There are various conversations happening. So what's your experience in how do you moderate it? How do you regulate it? Any tips, especially when the groups are going to be large for large ministries and organizations? What are your tips?
Yeah, I would say once a group gets beyond 15 people, the dynamic's going to change. And so beyond 15 people, you're going to have different type of moderation strategies, especially as you get over 50 people. And I've done both where different practices. So for example, under 15, you can be very casual, very intimate. But once you get above 15, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to set some ground rules. And so what I've done with our large groups, once you get above 50 or around 50 people, I actually in the front part will say, hey guys, this is how we're going to interact in the chat. So respect people's privacy. Don't attack each other. Hear people out. If you post something that's not on topic, we will remove it. And so do things like that. And then the other thing, it's really important, is to have another person with you that's moderating the chat. And so, for example, we at my church, we do a teaching every month where it's about a 2.5-hour training every month, where it's like spiritual disciplines. And I teach that for 2.5 hours. And then I have 2 people of my church that I've trained to be moderators in the chat. And so I get to focus in on teaching or leading the group. And then these 2 people answer the questions. And then what happens is they answer questions. And then these 2 people that I've trained, they also will message me on a separate platform if there's a question I need to pause. And so the larger the group you have, the more people. I think if up to 50 people, have 1 moderator. And this is a new ministry opportunity. I would launch a new ministry at your church where you have people that are really good at that. But if more than 50 people, I might have 2 people in the chat. And then in my case, you might actually have a private thread. So the idea is that there's the chat happening on the online group where there's 2 people moderating the chat. And then if I'm leading the group, they can message me on a separate platform. We might have a Facebook message thread up or a WhatsApp thread. For example, right now, actually, with this training, we're doing this, but we use Slack. So I have Slack up on my iPad to the left of me. So for example, if my audio goes out, I can see Nachi might message me and go, hey, we can't hear you. So those are things I would do. Really important to have a dedicated person or persons to the chat moderating and engaging. And you will have to maybe remove people, and that's okay. That's why the larger the group is, spend more time up front, kind of laying out the ground rules of what it is, and have a dedicated person or team engaging.
So would those moderators typically be people on staff, or would you also do volunteers? How comfortable are you with getting people maybe to volunteer or sign up for that role? So would you throw it open? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we predominantly use volunteers at our church. That's really important. And I just have some training that I have them go through that's pretty simple. And normally it's just a conversation. The best people to be moderators for, online groups, or even the same thing's true. We talked about this in the first webinar, and having a digital greeter on your Facebook or YouTube stream, having somebody moderating that thread. So those people might be good candidates to do this. But what I found is, and I don't mean to, this is a broad judgment, and so this isn't specifically true, but people under 25 tend to understand this in my church, know how to chat very well. Also business owners, people that have businesses that have had to figure out digital. Those are really good candidates to understand how to moderate a chat. And so we use primarily volunteers, and I train them. And I found by having one good person do it, is that person to train the rest. And so I use predominantly, we use volunteers.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's also very helpful here, because it's hard to get people on staff to understand everything, and especially large organizations. So we're getting a lot of questions related to one particular topic. So I just want to quickly touch that before I go and come back to questions on music. So interestingly, there are lots of questions on saying we sing songs, because here, we love to do that, even if it's a small group, even if it's a half an hour prayer meeting, we love to start with a song and sing. And so any thoughts on that? Should we do that? If so, any structure, any experience on how that has worked for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. You could tell my church, we clearly don't do that if I wasn't thinking that. No, we do. But and again, every small group is a little different on how they do this. So a couple things. Definitely, we have small groups that sing together on Zoom calls or on video calls. Two predominantly ways that I've seen it done, two big ways. One, sometimes they just share a YouTube clip, a worship song on YouTube, and they share it and they sing together. And I've done that, and it's been super powerful. Again, you might want some people to mute themselves, and that's okay. And so, but it's very simple. You can just find a YouTube clip of a worship song, and everybody gets together, you share the clip, and you sing together. I've also had, I've had somebody who leads worship where I actually have them take over I make them a co-host, and they sing a song. What's important is that if they're going to sing, couple things, there are some things in the audio setting of Zoom that you might need to change. And every platform has this. Zoom, for example, I'm most familiar with Zoom. They do something actually in their technology where they actually remove background noise. And so that's great for meetings like this, but in singing, it causes audio issues. So there's actually settings in the audio setting that you actually can change, and every platform has this. And in the coaching, you can ask this, but if you just Google, you can actually Google or go on YouTube, Zoom audio settings for singing, and they actually will show you how to change the settings. And sometimes too, if they're leading songs, it might be smart for them to have a better microphone. Again, these aren't things you need to do. I'm not saying you need to do them, but having a USB mic might be very powerful because you don't want to hear the hum of the computer. If you're using the mic from your computer, you're going to hear the hum and the noise, the fan. An external mic like mine, you're not going to hear that. And so, sharing a clip on YouTube and just sing together is very powerful, or having somebody lead us. So yes, I've been part of both, and they're very powerful. I was part of a meeting a couple months ago where we had about 120 people on, and we all sung together. And I will say, as a pastor, watching everybody sing, and now everybody was muted except for the person that was leading. It was really powerful. It was really cool because we had people from all around the world. We had people from India. We had people from Japan, from Europe, from Africa, from United States, and we were all singing together. And it was really cool. Even with everybody muted, it was really cool to watch. And so I think it is a powerful experience, and you can do it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sounds like it was a beautiful time. So we have one more excellent question from Sam Paul about differentiating between the Sunday service at this point and a small group meeting, because both are happening in Zoom. But I'm going to let you think about that. I'm going to quickly jump on to a couple of announcements, and I'm going to come back and we can answer that question. So one is, I just want to once again thank you. I'm going to thank you for thank you a couple of times here now, but really thank you, Jay. I want to talk about the free 90-day support. So all of you listen very carefully, because this is, like I said, not a regular thing that you hear everywhere. This is the MII team, and all of us have put a lot of effort, and there are a group of people who are actually standing by to help you for the next 90 days free of cost. And that includes Jay, that includes me. We are all going to be helping you solve your problems and move forward and help you implement this online group strategy, because we absolutely believe in this. So it's a very simple 3 steps. You're going to fill a form, which takes less than 2 minutes. Believe me, because I tried it. And it's just a set of 9 questions, 1-line questions. You just answer very quickly on your mobile phone or computer. And then once you finish that, you will get to a page that will give you a link to the support page. And bookmark that link, note that link, because that is the page you will use for the next 90 days to ask your questions via chat or via email. So that is how it's going to work. Now I'm putting up the QR code for the page and also the link. We'll also put that link on Zoom chat for everybody. But in case you just want to scan and straight away start filling it up, go ahead and do that. You can do it while we are talking about the questions, or you can just do it later as well, just the way you like it. So this is the QR code. I'm just going to leave that for a minute. While I talk about resources in MII, just for a minute, MII website has a lot of resources that you could use. Most of them are free. In fact, everything is free as of now. So you can just go and look at, there are courses, there are videos, there are talk shows. There's a lot of stuff. Then you can also download some PDF research material, white papers, and so on. So I want to specifically talk about India white paper that is there in the resources section. It is a research on how churches and media ministries can partner, and it has a lot of insights which you might not want to miss. And you can also go look at other things on the website, which is MII Global. So I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to leave this QR code here while we take answers from Jay. So that way some of you can scan it. So Jay, let's go back to the question. So this is a question I really like. I like a lot of questions here. I don't know if you'll have the time, but let's go through this question. This is a really practical question. So Sam Paul is asking, look, we've got Zoom meetings in which we run our entire church service now. Now we ask people again to come for, online groups and small groups on the same platform. So how do we go about doing that? Is there, how do we, another way I think what he's getting to is there, how do we incentivize people to keep coming back and do this?
Yeah. So it's really important that your worship service on the weekend in Zoom, however you're doing it, is you and the worship, your music team is going to predominantly do most of the talking. So obviously you're going to talk to people in the Zoom call, you're going to engage, but I would say 80% of your Zoom on the weekend is going to be you communicating, preaching, teaching, singing together. An online group during the week, the main difference is going to be them getting to talk. It's going to be 80% conversation. And so, I would promote this very simply by going, hey guys, our church is doing 2 things. We are meeting together corporately by watching the service on Zoom. And then during the week, we're having these online groups where you get to ask questions and engage and be heard. And so I would promote it by the value. What are they getting out of it? And obviously we know they're getting a great deal out of it because that's how, our faith is modeled, but you need to promote, like, this is where you get to engage and we get to share prayer requests and so forth. So I found the most effective way talking about this is actually by just looking at the book of Acts, Acts 5, where we saw the early church met in temple courts and house to house. And so obviously the early church, they They started off in the book of Acts by meeting at the temple courts because they were still very Jewish, but obviously over the course of the history of the book of Acts, they started to meet on Sunday and they stopped meeting at the temple courts, but they met regularly on Saturday, Sunday. They met during the week in houses. So that's how I would talk about it. As we look at the early church, they met in large forums, in small forums. So our large forum is on our Zoom call where we worship together, we preach a message, and then during the week, conversation. And so now I would say is that what you do need to make sure that those two experiences are different. And so that's where there's planning and like, what are you going to do during the week? You can't repeat the same thing. It has to be different. So when they go into the online group, it has to be, you have to have questions written where people can talk. If there's a lot of people, you got to use the Zoom breakout room function. So if it is the same thing, if you just preach again for 30 minutes, that's not an online group. That's another worship service. So I would make sure that they're different. But I would start by talking about the value add. What are they going to get out of it? It's that they're going to be able to share and talk and discuss. And I found online groups are very, what happens is even when your church gets to the size of 30, 50 people, not everybody gets to talk. It's too many people. And so small groups are a powerful way for people to get into smaller groups and be heard and seen. And so it's a powerful way to scale your church. And so, and this is why most large churches have embraced this model, because it's a way to make a big church feel small. But that's the ways I would talk about it.
Absolutely. I think that's a powerful approach, getting people to think about online groups as something about them and not just listening to somebody talking. So I think that's a good place to start. Thanks so much. The next question we have is also a practical one, where we are talking about people who are not able to attend. Those they sign up for the online group and they want to be there, but they travel or they miss it. So we have a question from a participant who says, do we upload it on YouTube or Facebook, or is that okay? Or how do we keep that person connected to what's going on in the group?
That's a good question. So I would suggest not uploading your online group conversation to YouTube, mainly because online groups, if they're done correctly, people are sharing personal things. Again, online groups are a time for people to open up, to share prayer requests. I don't want, when my small group meets, I talk about everything. I talk about, my marriage, my kids, my work. And I don't want all my junk, my garbage out on the internet somewhere. So I wouldn't encourage you to upload your online group experience to YouTube or to some kind of platform. I would keep that private. Your worship service, of course, but I would keep the online group just the discussion. And if people miss, two options. One, you just be very clear that our online group time. It's kind of like your online groups are like, if I'm going to get coffee with you, Nachi, we're going to sit down at a good coffee shop. I'm going to get a good espresso drink, and we're talking. If you miss it, I'm not uploading that conversation afterwards. It just got missed. And that's okay. Sometimes people miss things, and sometimes by even having that idea that this is the principle of scarcity. If I miss it, I miss it. It's going to move people to go there. And it's okay if people miss church or miss the online group. The second thing is you can encourage them to launch their own online group where they can actually, and obviously if they're brand new, they're not going to do this immediately, but maybe what they do is that they can join your online group for a bit and learn what it means. And then if they can't come because of travel or work, you encourage them to launch their own online group. And we do this often where people will want, I just got an email this morning. We're hosting an event a couple Sundays from now at 2 p.m. Pacific time in California. Well, internationally for me, in India and throughout Asia, that's not a good time for people. It's not a good time. And so they wanted to do this event. They go, are you going to launch this for a more Asian friendly time? And I just essentially told them, I go, you can do that. And I encourage them to do it. And so this is where it's modeling is important. If you have a large group where people can experience it for a little bit, and then if they can't come regularly, encourage them to launch their own. And so I wouldn't upload it, but just because of the private nature of it. I would just say, hey, if you miss it, you miss it type of thing. And then ultimately encourage them to launch their own online group. And again, this is the difference between some people do online groups or Bible studies or cell groups, you either have a master teacher model or you have a host model. A master teacher model is where you have like an expert teaching. And then a host model is where you have somebody leading a conversation. And one requires more training. And so, for example, if they need to be really educated, then you're going to have less of those, but maybe it's harder for them. But those models are really important on how you launch your groups. We lean towards the host model, where we're going to send you some questions. The link that we post in the base is going to do most of the teaching, and we just want you to kind of do it yourself. So like this person, because of the host model, it's really easy for them to launch a group. But if you're the master teacher, where they need to know a certain amount of stuff about the Bible, there's going to be more training and it's harder. But that's how I would start to think through it.
Got it. Yeah. The next question we have is related to children's ministry in a groups kind of setting. So do you use small groups for children ministry? If so, are there any tips related to that?
Yeah, we do. My wife actually led a kids Bible study last year at the end of at the last of our school year here in the United States with first graders, which were our predominantly 6 years old, so 6 to 7 years old, if you think about that. So it is possible. A couple things I would say about with kids. First off, security is really important. So make sure that I would use waiting rooms. I would change out the link every week. That's really important with security, both for you as the host or the church, and also parents want to know that. And then what we did was we would send tips to the parents on how to set up a good Zoom call. So we would actually say, hey, by the way, we're going to do this Zoom with your kids. A couple things. Can you just have the computer or the phone set up and not a noisy part? Can you just make sure the TV isn't turned on in the background? Maybe put them in a room where there isn't a bunch of distractions. And then can you be with them to the side so that, just help them stay on track? Again, the older the kid is, the less you have to do that. But obviously with 6 to 7 year olds on Zoom, they're very distracted. We found kids, especially if they're under 8, they really love the idea that they can just talk anytime. So they're muting themselves. So one of the things, the younger the kids are, you actually have to enable your different platforms have different features, but Zoom, you actually can make it so the host has to unmute you. So that's something that you might want to do because, like, for example, 6-year-olds or 5-year-olds are just going to unmute and start talking because that's what they do. They just talk. Kids talk. They don't respect the rules of society. And so by the host, you might need to enable that where you go around, you go, okay, you go to kid 1, you say, okay, I'm going to mute you, you talk, and now you do stuff like that. Those are some of the things we've done to kind of make kids time very well. I will say one of the things we learned is that to do kids small groups online well, they have to be shorter and there has to be less teaching. And so we jumped to conversation and we try to make them have fun quicker. So one of the things one of our groups, many groups did here is that they would actually, and again, this gets harder depending where you're at. My oldest son, he's 9 years old. His kids small group that he was part of, his leader actually dropped off at our doorstep bags of different things. And then what they said is you can't open it until you're on the Zoom call. And it was a really cool idea. So when they all came together, now again, my wife's group, she didn't do this. So not every group did this because obviously you have to travel and you have to do things and you had to be, safe during COVID. But this is really cool. They all opened this bag together on a Zoom call. And one of the times they did it, they actually had different communion elements and they actually took communion over the Zoom call. And so they actually had dropped off a little thing of this and a cracker. And it was just a really creative idea to kind of get people engaged. But security, sending some tips to the parents, having the parents' presence to the side, depending how young, and then just try to keep it shorter and have more fun. Just those are some of the general tips.
Yeah. Thank you. I love the idea of communion over the group and also the bags, probably lots of fun. So we're getting a lot of questions, but we're running out of time. And I just want to tell everyone who has asked a question, we will answer every one of them. We'll try to get back to you directly. We have your registration details, so we'll try to send you the answers to your questions. But I think we've covered most of it. We've grouped some of them. So I have one final question before we close this session in the next few minutes. We want to close at 9. And that is on measurement metrics. So I know you are a big fan of measurement and details. So how do you measure the effectiveness of a group, especially a Facebook group or an online group, whether it's working as an organization? How do you know what works? Yeah, what are the metrics? What are the systems that you use?
Yeah, so big metrics. I measure how frequently they meet. So, and then this predominantly is built off of a relationship with the leader of the group. And so I might have, right now, for example, my church, we have about 2,300 small groups, online groups. That's a lot of groups. But out of those 2,300 groups, I know that about, I think it's 1,900 of those groups are meeting right now. And then what I do is I look at, okay, so I have about 400 or so groups that haven't contacted me over the last 3 months. And so so part of my job, actually I have somebody on my staff that helps me, that pastors these groups. He's always looking at these groups and he goes, okay, we have this many groups, which is great and exciting, but how many of them are actually have we talked to in the last 3 months? And so I look at how many of them are active the last 3 months. And then I look at what is the last study they've gone through. Like, are they studying, are they reading this book of the Bible? Are they watching this video curriculum? That's really important. And so I look at, are they active? And then what study are they currently going through? And again, that's based off of a relationship with that host. And either it's a text, a phone call, a Zoom, an email, and every person has a different deal. The last thing is we have a training that we recorded on how to lead a healthy group. And so I try to get every one of my hosts to go through this hour training, because we make it very simple for them to start a group, but I want them to learn more how to lead a healthy group. And so I might have, again, 2,300 small groups, but maybe only 1,500 of them have taken this training. So my job is to get all of them to take the training, because I know if they take this training, they're going to have more awareness of what it means to lead a good group. And then last, which is very available to answer any question. And so if I know they're meeting, if I know what study they're going through, and if they've taken this training, then I know that they're healthy. And then when I look at all my groups, I know the next step to keep them healthy. And so that's how we think of it at a large scale. There's actually a book that I would recommend. It's called Leading to How Healthy Online, How to Have Healthy Small Groups, by Steve Gladen. He's actually my boss. He wrote a book, and he's written many books. It's a book that I would really recommend to check out if you really wanted to get into the more robust on how to have good small groups. So that's something that we can kind of put links into the follow-up. I did want to highlight, I did put a link in the chat to a video training on how to do breakout rooms on Zoom that I did. So I put that in the chat. It also will be on the coaching.
Yeah, sure. We'll add that to the FAQ section. So those of you who've signed up, you will see there is an FAQ section on the support page. So there is an FAQ for the first webinar and the second and this one. So there are 2 separate FAQs. So there's a lot of research that you can use. So thank you so much once again, Jay, for the 3rd time. I want to thank you really from the depth of our heart on behalf of everyone here on this in this call, on behalf of all my all the team here in India and the people who are attending this. I really want to thank you for taking the time to do that. So let's close with prayer. We're getting closer to our time, and let's thank God for this time. Heavenly Father, we come to you in Jesus' name. We thank you, Lord. We asked you to be with us and teach us at the beginning of this. And that is exactly what you did. We thank you. We thank you for all the strategies that were shared, all the insights that were shared by Jay here. Thank you for the experience that you've given him. Right now, all of us who are praying here, we stretch our hands and bless Jay in the name of Jesus. We thank you for giving him the experience and the expertise to come and share, and the heart and the willingness to come and share it with us. We thank you for MII. We thank you for David Benway. We thank you for the entire team behind this webinar, everyone who has put effort into this. We thank you, Lord. We also especially pray that you will be with every single participant here. People who have asked questions, people who have engaged, people who have listened to this, and people who have, there were some comments that said, I got a new idea today. So I just pray especially for that person, that that idea will develop, and every single person who has listened to this and is going back with a heart to start these small groups, I just pray that your wisdom will be with them and that you will guide them on how to do that, Lord Jesus. I pray that this will become a movement that will just trigger a great change and a transformation within ministries, and people will be blessed and ministered to in a personal, intimate, and a very deep way through these small groups, that not just today, but in the years to come, we will see fruits of this webinar come to fruition in this great country of India, Father. We thank you and praise you. Once again, we bless the whole team behind this, and we thank you for giving us this opportunity, Lord. Be with all of us, continue to guide us. May your hand lead us and may your voice guide us as we move forward. We love you, Lord Jesus. In Jesus' name we pray, Father. Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you once again, Jay. Thanks everyone for joining us. And do take a look at the website and all the resources in MI.global. And on behalf of Jay and the MI team, thank you very much. God bless you. Stay in touch, and we'll see you in the next webinar.